Hey everyone, welcome back to Crime Salad. Now, before we dive into today's case, we have a very quick scheduling update for this week's episode. We are running around crazy right now because our oldest son is officially heading to the state championship for a track meet. He actually just broke the school record. Actually, he shattered it. And we are so incredibly proud of him. It's going to be a huge week for him. And because we're traveling and cheering him on, we are putting a re-release on the feed today. This is an episode that we originally posted back in August of 2025, and we had it titled The Undetermined Death of Heather Turner. But that has changed. You'll see why. And it's a case that has stuck with us deeply. But be sure you stick around all the way to the very end of this episode because a lot has happened. It's been almost a year. And in Paulding County, since we originally dropped this episode, we actually sat down before we hit the road and recorded a massive brand new segment covering all the explosive updates. There's leaked documents and official rulings that have recently come out in 2026, so pretty recently. And you're not going to want to miss this new information. We'll be back on our regular schedule with a brand new episode next week. Thank you all so much for supporting us. We really appreciate it. And here is our original coverage of the Heather Turner case, followed by the complete 2026 update.
This episode contains discussions of domestic abuse, physical violence, emotional manipulation, and other content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Listener discretion is strongly advised. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, help is available. You can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-7233 or text START to 88788 for confidential 24/7 support. Please prioritize your well-being as you listen.
Paulding County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
Ambulance probably on the way. Hurry.
Listen, your phone is cutting out. I can't understand you. What's the address?
It's 88 Buck Trail, B-U-C-K.
Okay, what are the numerics? I know Buck Trail. What is the numerics?
88 Buck Trail.
Okay, 88 Buck Trail.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, is that in Paulding County?
It is.
Okay, what are you calling to Listen, what are you calling to report?
Wife has shot herself in the bathroom.
Your wife just shot herself? Was this intentional? Listen, was this intentional? Sir, take a deep breath. Listen, was this intentional?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, listen, sir, take a deep breath. Listen, responders, sir, take a deep breath. Responders are being notified, but I have some more questions for you. It's not going to slow them down. Take a deep breath. What's your name?
My name is Andy.
What's your last name, Andy?
Turner.
At just after 6 in the morning on May 4th of 2017, a 911 call came into the Paulding County Dispatch in Dallas, Georgia, which is just about 30 minutes outside of Atlanta. A woman had been found with a gunshot to her head, naked, lying on the bathroom floor with the shower still running. Her name was Heather Turner, a 35-year-old mother, church member who was just hours earlier was planning to leave her serious long-term relationship. The man on the phone making the emergency phone call was Heather's boyfriend, Andy Turner. He told dispatch that Heather had taken her own life, but even in that first phone call, things weren't totally adding up. It was a scene that, according to Heather's loved ones, felt staged. Today, we're looking at the ongoing case of Heather Turner, an open case that, after almost 10 years, is still ruled as undetermined in relation to her true cause of death. There have been no arrest, no charges, and worst of all, no real closure for Heather's family. The evidence tells a complicated story. And before we dive any deeper, I want to let you know that this is a complex case. It's full of contradictions, inconsistencies, and question marks that have been left unanswered. So we're going to do our best to untangle this web. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad. Heather Nicole Milam was the kind of person people gravitated towards. She had this big, infectious smile and a calming presence that made her easy to talk to. And she was someone who could light up a room and make you feel like the most important person in it. She was a devoted mother, friend, and sister. She had been described by many around her as an amazing energy and light to everyone around her.
Heather shared that energy and light through two main ways according to her family and loved ones, and that was through singing and writing. She loved to write letters and was very talented at using words to express herself, and her family still has those beautiful letters that she wrote. And there's this YouTube video of her singing from about 13 years ago. It's kind of a beautiful sadness to go back and watch her.
She just had such a wonderful voice. As we said, she was a talented singer, and she was very involved in church life. And she actually got married right out of high school around the year of 2000 to her high school sweetheart, Philip Elsner, who was the preacher's son. And they remained quite active in their church and later would welcome a son together.
So you have to be wondering, how did Heather meet Andy Turner, the guy that was on the 911 call?
It's a little interesting. So in 2004, the church hired an associate pastor, as we now know, Andy, who was also a preacher's son. And he primarily worked with the kids and youth in the church. So we can assume that he possibly became acquainted with the couple through their son. Andy was described by many as having a big, charismatic personality, but also had those chameleon-like tendencies, meaning that he was able to match the energy around him and fit in anywhere. So it was kind of easy for him to relate to a lot of different kinds of people. Now, down the road, Heather and Philip, they started to have marital problems, and they reached out for counsel from the leadership of the church. And one of those people who counseled them ended up being Andy.
So Heather became close with Andy through him counseling her on her current marriage, which from what I know, Andy was also married at the time and had 2 kids of his own.
And apparently in 2008, there were some rumors that came out that they were having this affair. And a short time later, they both divorced their spouses and started dating each other. Records show a marriage certificate that dated in 2014 between Heather and Andy, officiated, at least on paper, by a local pastor. But here's the complicated piece. That pastor later said he never married them. Actually, he claims that his own signature on their certificate was forged. And according to Heather's friends and one of her coworkers, Heather had confided in them that she never agreed to that marriage at all. So while she was legally listed as Heather Turner and also went by that name, it's possible that she never intended to. So this changes how we look at everything else that follows this. If Heather never consented to that marriage, what else in her life might have been affected by someone else's control?
And honestly, it's not every day that a pastor publicly claims that his signature was forged on a marriage license. That's crazy.
That's pretty serious. Yet it doesn't seem like that allegation led to any kind of official investigation into the document's authenticity. And as we'll learn, there will be a lot of questions as we continue to unravel this information, especially regarding some of the inactions taken by investigators. So as Andy and Heather's relationship grew, they eventually welcomed their own child together, a daughter. So together, they had 3 boys and 1 girl from previous marriages and also together. It seemed that things were going pretty well. Heather even got a job in 2016 at the probate court in Paulding County, where Andy's mother also worked. But it was at this time where Heather told a coworker here that even though she took Andy's last name, she was never really married to him. And from here, eventually things became more outwardly strained between the couple. Cindy, Heather's aunt and mother figure, reported that Heather would call her, alleging that Andy was abusing her and had even asked her to come and pick Heather up, but would later call it off and tell her not to come. And according to her family, it became worse. Now, this is reported by Cindy, Heather's aunt, but Andy says that this is untrue. So this is kind of like a hearsay situation, but according to Cindy, Heather had given up custody of her son to her previous husband, Philip, after a supposed incident at Heather and Andy's house, claiming that Andy was abusing Heather's child. Now, again, Andy denies this, but it's very important to get this information out there, especially regarding the nature of Heather and Andy's relationship. By early 2017, things had reached a breaking point. Cindy had said that Heather became increasingly more distant from her, and Heather had confided in coworkers and, as an avid writer, had even written down her fears about her relationship. According to one main coworker at the probate court named Rob, Heather had sent him numerous emails about the nature of her and Andy's relationship. Rob described himself as being completely in love with Heather, and they had planned to be together after her separation from Andy, although he does say that they never acted on their feelings towards each other and never met outside of work. They were ready to be together after May 5th when Heather had planned to leave. And Rob has provided multiple sources, emails actually, between he and Heather, which said that Andy was trying to go to the judge's office to get Heather fired. He had accused her of sleeping with multiple people, also had locked her in their bedroom, and had taken his belt off like he was planning to hit her with it. Probably one of the most concerning of these emails is the one that reads, "He told me he would bury me before he signed divorce papers. I think that was a threat, but he said it was just an expression."
Yeah, I mean, according to these emails, it seems like she was documenting her abuse.
Exactly. So the last that Rob knew, allegedly, Heather was planning her separation, and the next time anyone saw her, she was lying on the bathroom floor of her and Andy's shared home with the shower still running. So let's talk about the timeline. So according to the official timeline, Andy Turner called 911 just after 6 a.m. from their home in Buck Trail, claiming that Heather had shot herself. He sounds panicked and distraught as the 911 dispatcher asks questions. He says the gun was beside her and that there's blood everywhere, and he doesn't know what to do. At this point, he says that she was still conscious, so the dispatcher directs him to use life-saving measures.
And this is such a difficult call to listen to. At one point, Andy starts making the sound like he's throwing up. And all you can really hear is Andy sobbing on the other end of the line. At that point, Andy's mother actually got on the phone with emergency dispatch, which was a surprise because Andy told the dispatch the only other person in the house was his 8-year-old daughter that he had with Heather.
Your baby daughter's there? Okay. Andy, is she in a different room?
Yes, I don't want her to walk in and see me.
Okay, take a deep breath for me, okay? I want you to keep compressing. Andy, where is your daughter? Is she asleep?
She's asleep on the couch in the living room.
She's in the living room? Okay, are you compressing? At least 2 inches, okay? Take a deep breath.
This is Mother.
Okay. Is Andy still there?
He's trying to revive her.
Okay, just as long as he's doing compressions at least 2 inches 100 times a minute, okay?
Okay, 100 times a minute, he's too sad.
So the presence of Andy's parents is confirmed in the official police report, but on the call itself, Andy never says anyone else is there, even after the dispatcher asked him. He says that his daughter is in the house and in another room, but never mentions his parents being in the actual bathroom with him while he's trying to revive Heather. It's not obvious until his mother literally gets on the phone and says this is his mother.
Right, and that's just another thing that makes this whole thing so complicated and hard to follow. So we learn later that Andy's parents live about 10 minutes away from him. And according to his father's statement to the police, Andy called them about 5 minutes before he called 911 to make sure his daughter didn't come into the room. We hear Andy's mother get on the phone about 11 minutes into the 911 call.
So at this point, the dispatcher asks if Andy is still trying to revive Heather. And right after that, Andy's father then gets on the phone, confirming very solemnly that Heather is beyond all help.
Bad reception. You believe she's beyond all help?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we can't leave out the incident report that was filed that day by the investigating officer. Curtis Turner, Andy's father, was standing in the front yard and told them that Andy and Heather were in the bathroom inside the house. Pamela, Andy's mother, was sitting in the living room and stated that they were in the bathroom by the bedroom and pointed them in the right direction.
Okay, so the confusing part of this is during the 911 call, Andy claims his daughter is asleep in the living room. But when the officers arrive, they don't report this. She wasn't in the living room sleeping. Who was in the living room was Andy's mother. And why this sticks out is Andy said that he called his parents before 911. And the reason being was so that his daughter didn't enter the bathroom. But when the police arrive, neither of his parents are actually with his daughter. And that's just weird to me.
So the officer walked into the bathroom and noted that there was a lot of steam, as if someone had taken a shower, and Heather's hair was wet, as if she had been in the shower at the time of the incident. Andy was holding Heather in his arms, and the officer noticed a gunshot wound on the left side of Heather's cheek, right in front of her ear. The officer asked Andy where the gun was located, and he stated it was wrapped in a towel next to the toilet.
So that means that Andy had moved the gun and wrapped it in a towel. Because during the 911 call, he told the dispatch that the gun was on the floor next to Heather. I mean, not to fault him or anything, but this is definitely going to affect how the crime scene is processed.
Right, and another thing the officer found was a notepad on the vanity in the bathroom with, "I'm sorry, I love you," written on it. And along with that was a cell phone lying by the notepad. The officer spoke with Andy's father, Curtis, after this, and he explained how Heather had been having just a hard time since her grandfather passed away, which was about a week before this. And upon speaking with Andy, he explained how the night before had been completely normal, where they ate dinner, hung out in the bedroom doing husband and wife things. He explained how Heather didn't act like she was thinking about harming herself last night or this morning, but did say that her ex-husband was filing for full custody of their son with his second wife, planning to adopt him, and that she was going to have to resign to be fired from her job that morning. So definitely all contributing to the self-inflicted aspect of this case. But that note really sticks out to a lot of people. They question that note a lot because if you remember from the beginning of this episode, we mentioned how Heather loved to write and she was extremely expressive and thorough with her words. This is a woman who poured her heart into lyrics and to her letters, and she was someone who communicated. That was a big part of who she was. And maybe that doesn't prove anything on its own, but I mean, it adds to the larger picture of doubt. And also the fact that Andy mentioned that Heather was going to be fired that day, because there are emails from Heather to Rob that Andy was actively trying to get her fired from her job at the probate court. But you wouldn't expect the investigators to know this about Heather, so they just obviously wouldn't look into that any further. Now, according to Rob, Andy had called him, threatened him for talking to his wife, and had even showed up at the probate section of the courthouse in April of that year to talk to the judge about firing Heather for the email exchanged between her and Rob. But he was escorted off the property. And on May 3rd, a day before this incident, Heather had actually met with the judge at the probate court to speak with him about her and Andy's relationship. There's documentation of this conversation where the judge says that she was made aware by Heather that the couple was having domestic problems and that Andy had a gun in his possession. This report also says that because of their issues, Heather was concerned for Andy to come to the probate section of the courthouse. And because of this, there was another employee of the courthouse who was sent to speak with Heather about this situation. And Heather advised that she did not wish to file a report because she didn't want to make her husband mad. And it was at this point that Rob made the judge aware of the threatening phone call from Andy, and courthouse security was made aware of that as well. But Rob also declined to make a police report because he didn't want to make Heather's problems worse. Now, this is an incident report, so it's just a record of what was said by Heather and Rob. So we're not saying that this is proof, but it's just important information to put out there. And with all of this background information, especially since this conversation happened the day before Heather's passing, it makes the nature of her death seem so suspicious, especially since Heather was planning to leave the next day. But investigators wouldn't know any of this when they walked into the house that day, which may be the assumption of the officers that Heather did this to herself caused them to just handle the scene differently from a typical crime scene. The house wasn't taped off, and it doesn't seem like any physical evidence was collected. Andy was never tested for gunshot residue on his hands. So it seems that this assumption caused a lot of typical crime scene processes to be skipped over.
And you can't really overstate how unusual that is. An unattended death by a gunshot, a crime scene that could have already been messed with, but then there's no scene control when emergency services get there. Usually standard practice would involve testing anyone at the scene for gunshot residue, Andy included. And it's so discouraging that this step was skipped because it could have added so much clarity to the case.
It's definitely strange. And it actually took 12 days for investigators to return to the Turner home with a search warrant, which was issued based on suspicions of felony murder and aggravated assault. And by that point, the scene had already been lived in for almost 2 weeks by Andy and his children. So we have no idea what could have been changed during that time.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't help but to think about Heather's family and friends during this. I mean, their hope of having any physical evidence to give them answers seemed like it was basically gone.
The only real evidence that we really have is the coroner's report and the autopsy. So we can talk about that. The coroner's report stated that the entrance wound on Heather's head was on the right side with no obvious exit wound, and Heather was found naked on the bathroom floor.
Yeah, and didn't the incident report from the officer state that the wound was on the left side of Heather's head?
Yeah, so just another piece of confusing information, honestly. And the medical examiner wrote in that report that there was no obvious exit wound, so we don't really know which one is correct at this point. And if it was the left side, that's definitely concerning since Heather was right-handed. But again, I mean, things happen. We really don't know. The report also stated that officers took photos of the scene. So there's that at least, but obviously we don't have access to those photos since it's still technically an open case. So then another weird part was that the coroner's report noted that the initial 911 call came in at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, when police spoke to Curtis, Andy's father, he said that Andy called him about 5 minutes before the 911 call. The officer also wrote in the incident report that Curtis then pulled out his phone to give the officer an accurate time of the phone call and stated that the call was at 5:59 a.m. And they weren't there the night before or stayed the night or anything because Curtis also said to the officer that when they got the call from Andy, they drove right over. And also, in the coroner's report, the medical examiner summarized the same thing that Andy had told the investigating officer about Heather's recent struggles and the events of the evening before and the morning of the incident. The only additions here from the incident report is that there was alcohol present on one of the nightstands in the bedroom, and a wall near the toilet had appeared to be washed. I feel like it's kind of odd to spend time cleaning the bathroom wall before officers get there when you're in such a state of shock with a tragedy like this. Not to mention the fact that, as we've said a couple times, Heather was found naked. Her hair was wet from the shower. And, I mean, just an opinion, it seems odd for someone to go into a bathroom, take their clothes off, get into the shower, and then shoot themselves in the head. It just seems like not very characteristic of a typical self-inflicted passing. And all these things that we're saying, it caused the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to rule this case as undetermined. noting that there was just as much of a case for self-infliction as there was for someone else doing this to her. We don't have the autopsy report, but whatever they found during that autopsy caused them to be unsure of what really happened. So those are the facts of the actual incident, really, which leaves everything so complicated and honestly suspicious. So this case, it has the news reports about the incident. It has interviews, and it has updates from the investigative offices themselves, which have their own series of complications and inconsistencies, starting with the interviews with Andy from a couple different news outlets following Heather's death. And Andy was very willing to talk to news outlets about the incident and continued to mention the prolonged husband and wife time that they had the night before Heather died, with his children in the room during this interview. And what's very interesting about Andy's interviews, though, is that during his account of the events when talking to the news sources, he claims that he and his daughter both ran into the bathroom when they heard the gunshot, saying that we found her in the bathroom. This, instead of what he originally had said about her being asleep in the living room, which is what he told the 911 operator, it's just kind of, another story. It's not an admission of guilt or anything, obviously, but it's confusing.
And it was during these interviews with reporters that he realized officers were calling this case questionable, which must have been surprising for him.
Yeah, I guess that would be, huh? What do you mean they're calling this questionable?
Yeah.
The back and forth and all the opinions are so complicated, which makes the truth about Heather's state of mind in those final days really foggy. But what we do know is that she was planning to leave, at least from the multiple testimonies from those around her. She was making it known to the people that she talked to, that she trusted. And from that perspective, she died before she had the chance to leave.
Yeah, I think so too. And it makes sense that the family wants answers because, given all of this background information and the crime scene that's basically useless, it seems like the investigation was barely moving at all.
Well, a lot of public conversations around this case believe that Andy's relationship with the local community may have contributed to the delays that we saw with investigators. So let's take a little walk through what is known publicly. Okay, so Andy's father, Curtis Turner, he was a pastor. His uncle, John Turner, serves as a chaplain for the Paulding County Fire Department. And his mother, Pam Turner, worked at the courthouse where Heather also worked before she died. And Heather's family say that Pam was friends with the probate judge and the district attorney's office staff.
And we're not saying this means something is being covered up. In small towns like Dallas, Georgia, it's common for people to take on multiple roles. Everyone knows everyone and lines can blur. But in a case like this, it can raise serious concerns, especially when key decisions are delayed or handled strangely.
Right. And those questions grow when we learn that in 2019, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation reportedly handed its findings in the case over to the district attorney's office. But upon contact with the district attorney's officer, they reported that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had not handed their findings over. So, yeah, they're just still waiting for this documentation, apparently. And since then, there's been no indictment, no closure, and according to Heather's family, very little communication.
And that silence prompted Heather's supporters to speak out more publicly. They launched petitions and posted online, pointing out what they saw as inconsistencies in the investigation. They even began naming those they believed were responsible for the lack of progress, including elected officials, prosecutors, and law enforcement leaders.
But so much time has passed. It's been, as of today, 8 years since Heather died. You can only imagine how that feels to the family. They just want answers, and it's just all stuck in limbo.
So, what was Andy doing during all of this time?
Well, firstly, to this day, Andy has refused to speak with the sheriff's office or Bureau of Investigation for an interview on Heather's case. But one of the biggest aspects of this case that lends to the nature of Andy and Heather's relationship is his subsequent relationship with their nanny. So apparently, their relationship had become romantic soon after Heather died, and that relationship apparently didn't go very well. According to news sources, a Paulding County judge actually granted this nanny a restraining order against Andy, citing that he eventually began to abuse her physically and even sexually as the relationship progressed. We won't get into the specifics of that, but it's really concerning to say the least, with the nanny even alleging that Andy had threatened her life before, saying, "If I could do this to Heather, what makes you think I couldn't do this to you?" That's directly from an interview with this nanny.
That is messed up.
Andy's only response to this was that he has hundreds of hours of video of their sexual encounters, which I don't really know what that proves. But he also points out that her claims are very convenient for the public's current opinion about him. And in all this stuff coming up about Heather's private life with Andy, as well as his pretty questionable relationship with their nanny, Andy actually later self-published a book in 2023 called Who Turned Up the Silence, where he describes himself as a grieving husband and offers his version of the relationship. The description and excerpt of this book, it's publicly available, and his main claim is that he's breaking his silence amid people using social media to tell a twisted story and, quote unquote, weaponize their right to free speech in order to slander those they uneducatedly turn against and crush anyone brave enough to oppose them. The book is described more as his own life story, but focuses on breaking his silence about his wife's passing. And in this book, Andy highlights Heather as having emotional struggles and engaging in infidelity. This is in relation to the coworker we mentioned earlier, Rob, who had said that in interviews, Andy was fully aware of Rob and Heather's relationship. Heather's family and friends have said that a lot of this book is not at all accurate to what Heather had privately shared with them. It probably felt like a rewriting of history to them, which disconnected them even more to the idea that she did this to herself. Plus, this information about the nanny. I mean, why wouldn't you keep fighting for answers? And that brings us to everything Heather's loved ones have been doing to keep this case moving. I mean, they've shown up at city meetings, filed open records requests, kept detailed notes of timelines, inconsistencies, and unanswered questions. And they've done it while navigating a system that they felt like was keeping them in the dark and pointing fingers to everyone else. So Paulding County Police, they say that they can no longer investigate because they had already handed it over to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And the Georgia Bureau of Investigation has said that their investigation is concluded and has been handed over to the district attorney. But as we know, the district attorney is disputing that. So this case is basically just stuck in limbo right now. Heather's close ones have repeatedly asked why no one secured the home, why the warrant came so late, why Andy never tested for gunshot residue, and why a case labeled as undetermined hasn't moved forward in almost a decade, even after the Georgia Bureau of Investigations supposedly submitted their findings. The family has been speaking to the public and even brought their concerns directly to law enforcement, the district attorney's office, and also the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. At one point, they even met with the governor's office, hoping to bring more visibility to Heather's case. They are warriors for sure. So there's been a lot of visibility for her case, which includes the Justice for Heather Facebook page, where Heather's family and friends have shared documents, timelines, and official correspondences to keep everyone in the loop. It's almost like they're doing their own investigative work. But they're honestly so inspirational in the strength that they've shown through all of this. And to think that this case is still undetermined after all of their efforts, it's so discouraging. They've been waiting for years for quote-unquote further investigation to arrive. But from their perspective, nothing has changed, and we don't know if it ever will. It's easy to look at a case like this and feel overwhelmed. I know there's a lot to this case, but for families like Heather's, giving up isn't an option.
Hey guys, welcome back. So as we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, there have been some major updates and official developments in Heather Turner's case since we first released the story back in August of 2025. In February of 2026, the Paulding County Sheriff, Ashley Henson, held a press conference to announce that they were officially closing the cold case. After nearly 9 years of being labeled undetermined, and we even handed out these cards at CrimeCon saying the family is pushing for something to move in this case. It's been undetermined for way too long. The sheriff's department brought in a retired cold case detective, Eddie Herman, and he reviewed the files. And according to their press, the forensics painted a clear picture. Heather's DNA was on the trigger guard. Her hand was tested positive for gunshot residue, and Andy's hands were tested negative. Now, based on those findings, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had already amended their autopsy report in January of 2026 to reflect a suicide. But if you think this closed the book on Heather's case, you would be wrong. Thanks to an open records request posted on the Justice for Heather Turner Facebook page, we now know exactly why the family is pushing back. So the family posted on the Heather Turner Facebook page a document, and it was revised on February 15th of 2026. This document reveals that the cold case investigators literally labeled the original on-scene coroner's observations as fiction. The coroner's original report stated the entrance wound was on the right side of Heather's head and that her hair was wet from the shower. But this new document lists both of those observations as fiction, claiming the wound was actually on the left side of her head. And the craziest part, the Paulding County coroner, Lindsay Eberhardt Fuller, who was physically standing in that bathroom in 2017, was never even consulted by Sheriff Henson, Captain Mike Hill, or the cold case unit before they made these claims. And because of this, Coroner Lindsay Eberhardt Fuller released a statement making it clear that she will not amend Heather's official death certificate until she can independently review the complete medical and forensic records herself. And the deeper you dive into these open record files, the more the official narrative falls apart. When the family finally got their hands on the dispatch logs, they realized the official timeline of that morning literally defies the laws of physics. It's completely chaotic. So according to the official CAD logs, the computer-aided dispatch, the 911 call came in at 6 o'clock in the morning. To be specific, 6 o'clock and 22 seconds. And the units were dispatched at 6 o'clock, 51 seconds. But the fire department's own report lists their arrival time as 6 o'clock, 59 seconds. That is an 8-second response time. Some think that it's physically impossible for a fire unit to receive a dispatch and arrive on scene in 8 seconds, not to mention 6 o'clock in the morning. That same fire report shows that they cleared the scene at 6:02 and 4 seconds. They claimed the EMS made patient contact. They told the fire department it was a signal 48, which means a deceased person, and the fire department left immediately. That means their total time on the scene was about 1 single minute. Except the fire department's own personnel logs from that exact time show firefighters performing medical at scene. And the EMS statements confirm that 2 firefighters actually entered the bathroom where Heather was found. You can't be actively in the bathroom performing medical duties and also clear the scene in 60 seconds. And the CAD logs prove the scene was highly active well beyond that 6:02 clear time. The logs show continued activity, and then at 6:16 a.m., dispatch logs a note to send in rescue. A signal 48 to contact the coroner wasn't officially logged until 6:19. So we have this 8-second arrival time, a 1-minute clear time. We have CAD logs showing rescue units being sent in at 6:16 in the morning. And yet, Sheriff Ashley Henson publicly stated that the fire department arrived at 6:16 a.m. These records can't all be true. So if the timeline is a mess, just imagine what the physical evidence is. According to the original crime scene investigator, a blood-stained towel that was found right next to the toilet, it was partially covering the gun, and Heather's body was found partially covered by 2 other towels. But those towels weren't immediately bagged and tagged. Instead, they were left wrapped around Heather's body, transported to the medical examiner, and then formally released to the Clark Funeral Home. Law enforcement literally left bloody crime scene evidence sitting at a funeral home for 14 days before the crime scene investigators finally retrieved them on May 19th, 2017. And there's even more questions. On September 7th, 2022, an evidence inventory revealed that the biohazard bag containing those towels was sitting inside a completely unsealed brown paper bag in the sheriff's office evidence room. A sergeant had to officially seal it with evidence tape 5 years after the fact. And when they were finally opened in 2024, they were covered in blood, mold, and dried tissue. But there is absolutely zero documentation that the lab ever tested them for DNA or gunshot residue. And the towels aren't the only untested evidence. So during Heather's autopsy, medical examiners clipped her fingernails specifically to test for defensive DNA. But according to the state's own tracking system, those fingernails bounced around lab coolers and vault carts for 10 months. On March 13th, 2018, they were sent right back to the Paulding County Sheriff's Office, completely untested. But perhaps the biggest red flag is what happened to the digital evidence. Heather's primary phone, a gold iPhone 7 Plus, was found right next to the notepad in the bathroom. In August of 2017, Andy provided the passcode to the investigators, and the GBI successfully extracted the data. The data showed a photo was taken of Andy and Heather holding hands at 4:25 a.m., the morning of her death. But just 32 minutes later, at exactly 4:57 a.m., there was an internet search on that phone referencing a Google account password change. That is roughly 1 hour before Andy called 911 at 6 o'clock in the morning. So who's trying to change a Google password at 4:57 in the morning right before a tragic death? We have no idea, because in late 2025, Captain Mike Hill in the Cold Case Unit decided to pull the phones out of evidence to run them through updated extraction technology. But on January 8th, 2026, Captain Hill noted that the GBI agent advised him Heather's phone was suddenly locked in recovery mode and could no longer be accessed. So how does a phone that was working in 2017 suddenly become locked in recovery mode while sitting in a secure law enforcement evidence vault? And to make matters worse, the files are completely missing the updated handwritten chain of custody logs that would show exactly when that physical phone was checked in and checked out during the late 2025 timeframe. So with unsealed evidence bags, untested fingernails, phones locking up in police custody, and impossible timelines, the family has documented reasons to double-check every single piece of data coming out of Paulding County, especially from the district attorney's office. So on the Justice for Heather Turner page, the family recently shared a side-by-side comparison of the DA's publicized trial statistics against actual court outcomes. The DA's office had posted a graphic celebrating their 2025 conviction rate, listing a guilty verdict for malice murder in the case of State v. David May. The record showed the jury actually found the defendant not guilty on both murder charges, and he was instead convicted of aggravated assault. If official public relations posts can contain major discrepancies about court outcomes, it makes complete sense why the family is demanding an independent review of Heather's case. Heather's family has been reaching out to state politicians to ask the hard questions, but a lot of officials are refusing to return calls or emails. So we want to put those questions out there because why not? So here are the questions. What protections actually exist when a family believes conflicts of interest have affected a death investigation? How can the public have confidence in an official determination when the chain of custody accountability for digital and forensic evidence appears to be broken? And here's another one. When multiple agencies give completely conflicting statements, what oversight exists to find the truth? So, should Georgia have stronger independent external review procedures for disputed death investigations? I mean, these are questions that keep public confidence alive in our justice system. And until they're answered, the fight for Heather Turner is far from over. We are asking all of our listeners to please go to the Facebook page, Justice for Heather Nicole Turner. Read these open record documents yourself. Share her story, say her name, and help this family get the absolute transparency they deserve. We will continue to keep an eye on this case and let you know what happens with the coroner's independent review. Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode. We will see you next week.